Today is Wednesday, October 1st, 2025. This is a quick start from CBN News. I'm Dan Andros. Our mandatory digital IDs on the way. We'll have that top story and more on today's podcast, where we bring you news from a Christian perspective. Don't forget to subscribe and leave a rating. You can email us your thoughts, quickstartpodcast@cbn.org. quickstartpodcast@cbn.org. We'd love to hear from you. We're glad you're here with us, getting through the news of the day together each and every weekday bright and early. Joining me today, CBN's Trey Phillips. We have a lot to get to, including on the focus story. J.K. Rowling, she went scorched earth on a Harry Potter star over this transgender topic.
Yeah, so she's been going back and forth with a ton of celebrities over this. I think that J.K. Rowling has about had it, so we're going to talk about a lengthy statement she just released.
It is a phenomenal statement. Trey read me some of it, and just get yourself a nice beverage, whatever your favorite tea, coffee is. Sit down and get ready to enjoy this one, because it's solid stuff coming up. All right, on the main thing as well, mandatory digital IDs. Is it coming? In the UK, they're pushing for it, and a lot of people are calling it Orwellian. We've got the details coming up on that, on the main thing. All right, make sure you're subscribed to all of our CBN News podcasts. As always, the links are there, right down there in the description. You can find them, this and every podcast episode for Quick Start. We put them down there for you. Make sure you're checking those out. Also, don't forget to just share this podcast. If you're here with us frequently and enjoy it, share the podcast with a friend. We'd appreciate you helping get the word out. All right, we are going to head now to the news in 90 seconds. And the era of defense is over. That's Secretary of War now, Pete Hegseth. He rolled out sweeping changes at Marine Corps Base Quantico, declaring that all combat troops must meet the highest male standards for fitness regardless of gender. Hegseth blasted what he called fat troops, lowered standards and political correctness, saying the military must return to maximum lethality. Daily PT, twice yearly fitness tests, and strict grooming rules are now mandatory. He made clear that the rules apply to everyone. Weak men won't pass either, and women can still serve if they meet the bar. If they don't qualify, so be it, he said. The secretary also scrapped DEI programs, gender ideology, and climate initiatives, insisting the focus is singular, preparing to win wars. And a historic day of peace. At the White House, President Trump rolled out a sweeping plan. Release all 48 hostages within 72 hours in exchange for 250 Palestinian prisoners and an immediate end to the war. And he gave that to Hamas. And so far, they've got just a short amount of time here to make a decision. Those are just some of today's top headlines. You can check out more stories over at cbnnews.com. And Trey, I thought this was a brilliant move by President Trump, because he didn't say, hey, here's our plan, let's go give it to Hamas and see what they think. He basically came out and just said, all right, here it is. And looks good. Looks like everybody's on board with this. All right. And then now Hamas is sitting there like going, oh, I guess we've got to do it. And I also heard another great point someone brought up, and I forget who it was. I just saw it amidst all of the commentary on this. So apologies to whoever made this great point. But they were saying that not only is this a difficult position that Trump has put Hamas in on the world stage, now all eyes are on them thinking that they've agreed to this thing. You've got like the fourth string in there for Hamas. Why? Because first string, second string, third string, they're all dead. They've been killed by Israel and by the IDF. So the top terrorists are dead, and now you just got these guys off the deep bench who don't know what's going on, and they're having to deal with this. And so I thought it was a brilliant move here by Trump, and we'll see what happens here in the coming hours.
Yeah, look, I mean, this is definitely something to keep our eye on. It's something that we, of course, have been reporting on extensively here at CBN News, the state of Israel and all that's going on there with Hamas. And so much of this is all about information and misinformation, right, that has been flooding the internet and social media and, of course, making its way into the news. I think it's crazy that we have a media who is going to listen to what Hamas says and say, wow, this is the Hamas's perspective on this. So we need to report on what they're saying. It's the same as during COVID, which we've talked about this so many times. Whatever China said, CNN was taking China's word for it about COVID and the origin of that illness. So like, I think we're dealing with a lot of that, and Trump is being just incredibly bullish in this. Like, I'm going to get out in front of this. We're not going to suggest something. We're not going to lob an idea out there. We're going to say, this is what we're doing. Get behind it, or the train is going to steamroll ahead. And I think that's the right move, right? Is for Israel, especially, it's their country. So Israel needs to be aggressive in their messaging. And the United States is Israel's biggest ally. We have a lot of good political reasons, setting aside the faith reasons, to be aligned with Israel. I think it's important that we take a similar tack. So we'll see, like you said, what ultimately happens.
Yeah, we'll see. And listen, President Trump has had, I think even if you look at how he's tried to negotiate with Russia and bring them to the table, and then when Putin just didn't give an inch, he has now turned back on that. I think President Trump has done a relatively good job, as good as you can do, given all the dynamics that are going on now, in trying to deal with and trying to bring peace. I mean, that is what he's talked about. That is what his goal is. So we need to keep praying for that, because obviously we don't want a bunch of wars going on, and that makes things difficult for everybody. All right, well, we're going to go to the focus story now, and now we're going to go to this J.K. Rowling confrontation she had with one of the stars of the Harry Potter movies that, she helped create. So let's see, what did she have to say here, Trey, and what triggered her to even want to talk in the first place?
Yeah, so speaking of peace, there is no peace right now between J.K. Rowling and Emma Watson, who's one of the stars of the Harry Potter movies. She played Hermione Granger in that series. So during filming of the Harry Potter movies, all reports indicated at the time that Rowling and Emma Watson had a good, fine relationship. You have to remember, of course, that Emma Watson, like most of the stars of the film, were children at the time. So it wasn't until years later, in 2020 to be exact, that the two really started parting ways. So we're going to go back in time here a little bit, but it started in June 2020 when Rowling, now famously, we covered it at the time, condemned transgender ideology that was creeping its way into even the ways that we speak. She condemned the, quote, people who menstruate verbiage, and argued that a person, even if they might identify as a sex opposite to what their actual bodies are, they can't in actuality ever change their sexes. You can identify as whatever you want, but if you're a male, you're always going to be a male, and if you're a female, you're always going to be a female. So Watson then publicly spoke out in support of transgenderism. At the time, she said, quote, trans people are who they say they are and deserve to live their lives without being constantly questioned. And Watson would make several other kind of veiled attacks at Rowling. She would never necessarily specifically say Rowling's name, but her pro-transgender messages would always seem to come right after J.K. Rowling would say something. So fast forward to now, Watson just appeared on Jay Shetty's podcast, where she was asked how she's coping with Rowling's, quote, extremely hurtful rhetoric on transgenderism, which that question alone is kind of ridiculous. How is this, cushioned, easy living celebrity coping with somebody else's opinion? Anyway, that's another issue. But setting that aside, Watson said that she, quote, treasures Rowling, and said that her deepest wish is that she be allowed, that Emma be allowed to remember who Rowling was and what their relationship was like during filming the Harry Potter movies, while still condemning Rowling's views now as problematic. So that's kind of what sparked all of this.
All right. Now, I set it up because you had read some of it to me, but let's hear what she had to say, because this is some flame throwing from a prolific writer.
Yeah, so Rowling went absolutely scorched earth on Watson. It's a very long statement that Rowling posted to X, so I'm not going to read all of it, but I am actually going to read quite a bit of it, but these are really just the highlights. She started saying, I'm not owed eternal agreement from any actor who once played a character I created. The idea is as ludicrous as me checking with the boss I had when I was 21 for what opinions I should hold these days. However, Emma, and Dan, referring to Daniel Radcliffe, Radcliffe, in particular, have both made it clear over the last few years that they think our former professional association gives them a particular right and obligation to critique me and my views in public. Years after they finished acting in Harry Potter, they continue to assume the role of de facto spokespeople for the world I created. When you've known people since they were 10 years old, she said, it's hard to shake a certain protectiveness. Until quite recently, I hadn't managed to throw off the memory of children who needed to be gently coaxed through their dialogue in a big, scary film studio. For the past few years, I've repeatedly declined invitations from journalists to comment on Emma specifically, most notably on the witch trials of J.K. Rowling. Ironically, I told the producers that I didn't want her to be hounded as the result of anything I said. So Rowling went on to say that Watson has just poured more fuel on the fire over time, especially when Rowling was facing rape, assault, and even death threats being made against her, I mean. So these next two paragraphs, Dan, though, are the most scathing in Rowling's rebuke of Watson. She said, like other people who've never experienced adult life uncushioned by wealth and fame, Emma has so little experience of real life, she's ignorant of how ignorant she is. She'll never need a homeless shelter. She's never going to be placed on a mixed-sex public hospital ward. I'd be astounded if she's been in a high street changing room since childhood. Her public bathroom is single occupancy and comes with a security guard standing outside the door. Has she had to strip off in newly mixed-sex changing rooms at a council-run swimming pool? Is she ever likely to need a state-run rape crisis center that refuses to guarantee an all-female service? To find herself sharing a prison cell with a male rapist who's identified into the women's prison? I was not a multimillionaire at 14. I lived in poverty while writing the book that made Emma Watson famous. I therefore understand from my own life experience what the trashing of women's rights in which Emma has so enthusiastically participated means to women and girls without her privileges.
I mean, that is just some strong stuff right there.
Like
and
mic drop moment there.
Yeah, it's a complete mic drop moment. Very, very strong. And you can obviously tell she's a professional writer and a very good one at that, because she sums it up so very well. But what has the response been from others now that she's put this out?
Yeah, so one Irish author, Fiona McAnina, she falls on Rowling's side of the issue. She went on a British news station just this week to say, essentially, it seems too little too late for Watson. She argued that Watson has either been encouraged by those around her to soften her view on the trans issue because public opinion is actually shifting much more toward Rowling's than Watson's. Or she said Watson could just be trying to undo the years of animosity toward Rowling in hopes of a renewed relationship or maybe even new work. And then here at home, there are several conservatives who, of course, are praising Rowling, and Meghan McCain has been one of the actually loudest defenders of Rowling since all of this started years ago and has continued to be a defender of Rowling. She said on her own podcast this week, J.K. Rowling is a fearless icon who has risked her entire career, safety, and social clout for the sake of keeping our kids safe, women safe, and calling out the science fiction insanity claims that there are more than two genders. McCain went on to say, I'm grateful for Rowling and have no interest in anything associated with Emma Watson, who can stay at the pitchfork party she helped throw.
Yeah, I mean, it's really something, because I think what we're seeing, Trey, is, you know, all of us have blind spots that, meaning like I can't really relate to another person's circumstance because even though I've not grown up in wealth of any kind, I mean, I've been relatively, you know, I guess middle class or something like that. You know, I've had houses, you know, we've had a stable family, those sorts of things. So like, how can I really relate to someone from a crazy broken family and whatnot? So I've always had sort of at least an attempt in my mind to understand where people are coming from, you know, before you levy any criticism on somebody or disagree with them. And I typically never try to just you know, go after somebody personally, right? Like, and just hurl the personal insults. But it's like, let's talk about the substance of what you're saying. And I'm happy to talk about that and discuss that and debate it. But it seems like you're not allowed to do that in the other way. And it's been this way for a long time, is that one side always tries to bully you into feeling bad about your opinion, or you're feeling Even like the question you were talking about there, Trey, like I think, I can't remember if you just read it right now, but the one that the reporter said to Emma, and it's like, you think of that question. Yeah. It's so loaded.
Coping with it.
Right. It's so loaded that this other view is so bad and it's harming you. It's not here. Let's talk about your view and let's, talk about the merits of it. It's this other view is bad. Your view is good. How are you dealing with it? And it's that mindset that I think has just been such a cancer and a poison on culture, to the point where, I mean, the extreme end of that is what we saw with Charlie Kirk. Somebody was like, hey, Charlie's too hateful to even exist anymore. And they think he's hateful because of this mindset. What we're hearing right here from Emma Watson, that it's harmful for you to have an opposing opinion. And it's utterly ridiculous, not true. And I actually think, Trey, that we might be at the end of that. I think that people might be just done with feeling bad about my view. Like, you can't make me feel bad about my view. I'm not disparaging you by having a differing opinion. You can't come out with some crazy lifestyle and say I must accept it or I'm the hateful one. So I think people might be there. I could be wrong. I could be misreading the room, but that's my sense.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think we're at a tipping point culturally. I think people are fed up. I think the pendulum is swinging. I think we started to see that swing, honestly, with Donald Trump being reelected president. I mean, it wasn't like by a huge margin, but it certainly was a sizable margin for somebody like Trump, who is everybody
called a Nazi every day long.
Right.
All day, every day on the networks. He's called all kinds of names, and then he still won.
Right. He's expected to be to lose handily, and he didn't. So I think that was kind of the beginning of the pendulum swinging, and I think we've continued to see that trend moving, like I said a few minutes ago, more toward Rowling's point of view and away from Emma Watson's point of view. Even people who don't necessarily agree with Rowling, but they do agree that she has a right to say what she wants to say. You shouldn't be condemning somebody just for speaking their opinion. I think for Rowling, a lot of the gripe for her is, I'm the author of this series. I'm the one who wrote this content that turned you into a household name.
Yeah.
You don't get to be the spokesperson for who I am and for the content that I created. I think that is what is so... I'm sure for somebody like Rowling, it's like, you stop stealing the Harry Potter name from me and using my work as your platform to condemn me.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And, again, it's interesting, certainly. And listen, J.K. Rowling is about as well-spoken as they come. So it's interesting to see her interactions on this issue, because so many people are having these sorts of interactions, and I'm sure they will continue to. And, the ones that are important, we'll bring them to your attention, but appreciate bringing that to the podcast today. All right, we're going to go to the main thing now. And British Prime Minister Keir Starmer says digital IDs will be mandatory for anyone working in the UK. Critics are calling it a dangerous step toward government overreach. And to break it all down, CBN's Raj Nair is with British civil rights activist Emily Emanuel. That's today's main thing.
In what's being called Orwellian, British Prime Minister Keir Starmer just announced mandatory digital IDs. Take a look.
And that is why today I am announcing this government will make a new free of charge digital ID mandatory for the right to work by the end of this Parliament. Let me spell that out. You will not be able to work in the United Kingdom if you do not have digital ID. It's as simple as that.
British civil rights activist Emily Emanuel joins us now. So Emily, what was your reaction to Starmer's announcement?
Well, really, truly, completely shocked, but also not surprised. Keir Starmer has been a terrible, terrible prime minister right from the beginning. And I've never seen actually the UK population in such uproar against a prime minister in the time that I can remember anyway. So I am not surprised that he's trying to pull something out the bag that will try and get him some popular votes, although it's probably going to be completely the opposite. And if you didn't see, or I don't know if you've touched on this already, but there was a march a couple of weeks ago that had over 1 million people come along to it, which was in protest of these things that he's implementing and the state of how the state of the UK is at the moment with illegal immigration, with just this high kind of control of government. And so there's almost like a revolution going on in the ground in the UK at the moment, because people are just sick and tired of these policies that he's implementing.
Well, what's interesting is, obviously he made this announcement and he painted it in a way that this would help curb illegal immigration. But a lot of people online are saying, wait a second, you're saying these digital IDs where you won't be able to buy or sell, sounds a lot like what we hear in Revelation 13 when it comes to the mark of the beast. People are wondering, is this like a precursor to that? So let me just read what the Bible actually says about that, and then you can draw the dots together if you think they fit. It also forced all people, great and small, rich and poor, free and slave, to receive a mark on their right hands or on their foreheads, so that they could not buy or sell unless they had the mark, which is the name of the beast or the number of its name. Then the next verse says, "List calls for wisdom." So it does seem like a precursor, right? You cannot work without said digital ID. Obviously, I will let you, my friend who's watching this, connect the dots if you think that they are there. But Emily, can you just maybe peel back the onion a little bit more? What's kind of the sentiment of British folks when it comes to this illegal immigration? Obviously, he says this digital ID, Freudian slip, is intended to curb illegal immigration. But what's the status like of the British people's mentality when it comes to the current state of affairs when it comes to immigration?
Well, first of all, I find it incredibly hard to believe that this digital ID has anything to do with illegal immigration, because when I have had a job in the UK, many times I've had to show my social security number and my passport. So I've had to prove my right to work in the UK. So this doesn't make sense that we need a digital ID to prove our right to work in the UK when we already have systems in place that allow us to do so. Now, many of these illegal immigrant workers, and I've known some when I've lived in the UK, they don't work normal jobs. They work cash in hand jobs. So, you don't actually have to go through the system and pay taxes and all that kind of stuff. So that's not the issue. The issue isn't going to stop. The illegal immigration isn't going to stop because there's a digital ID in place. They will find out ways to work. And if not, they will find out ways to receive money from the government. So it's not going to stop anything like that. All it is going to put another form of control over the people in the UK, which the people are currently rebelling against at the moment. So the general sentiment amongst the people I know, but from news media outlets, is that this is not something that they want to see. If you want to stop illegal immigration, there are other ways to do that. Make a secure border, number one. I mean, that is what America is doing at the moment, which I totally agree with. And that is something that can be implemented. The UK isn't a big country. There is many ways to secure the border. And so I think this is a complete control tactic. And I think just along with other things that are happening in the world, such as, AI and then eventually super AI, we are heading towards that end time scenario then.
Well, when it comes to defending your border, you guys are an island, so it shouldn't be as hard as perhaps having physical borders.
Yeah.
But Emily, I think a question a lot of folks are asking, and we've done stories about the unrest that's really boiling over in the UK. So maybe in closing, how should we around the world be praying for your nation?
Oh, gosh, I have such a heart for the UK because there are a lot of amazing believers on the ground that really stand against some of these things that are happening in the UK. But there's a remnant. And, in comparison to the US, where there's a lot of people who are voicing their opinions and making a stand, there's definitely a remnant in the UK. So I just, my biggest prayer for the UK, and I would love for the viewers to join with this, is that more people would awaken to the truth and not buy into political correctness and to the deception that is coming our way just for the sake of being kind or nice or, compliant, but actually for people to start actually looking into the word, tuning into the Holy Spirit more and making a stand and speaking up and being okay with that. I think this is the time for the church to get its voice back again in the UK. America's churches they have a voice, not all churches, but it's definitely a bit more of a louder church here than the UK. And I think it's time for the lion to roar again in the UK and for people to stand up and say, no, we're not about this. This is what we're about. And for them to take charge and to lead the way of truth and righteousness in the UK.
All right, Raj, appreciate that conversation there. That is definitely, it's always kind of scary to see what's going on the other side of the pond because they always seem to be a couple steps ahead of us. And that, I guess, is the next frontier. Digital IDs openly pushing for that. So we'll keep an eye on that story for sure. Thanks, Raj, for bringing it to the podcast today. And that's going to leave us with time for one last thing.
Well, with all kinds of content, I think, being pushed around everywhere and arguments over things like the story we just talked about with J.K. Rowling, it's important to remember verses like this. It's Proverbs 1:7. It says, "The fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge. Fools despise wisdom and instruction."
Yeah, absolutely. And there's a lot on Proverbs on fools and foolishness and wisdom. And that one right there is where you go. You go to the Lord. That's the beginning of knowledge. You can't know anything really apart from him. So great spot to leave it on the podcast today. As always, get on over to cbnnews.com, faithwire.com for more news from a Christian perspective. Lord willing, that creek don't rise up on us. We'll be back tomorrow with more. God bless. We'll see you then.